my name is Vanessa Vallely and welcome to this Behind the Cover with the amazing, the incredible Jaspreet Kaur, also known as Behind the Netra. So I'm going to be talking to Jaspreet about her new book, which is the fantastic Brown Girl Like Me. Hi Jaspreet, welcome.
Hi Vanessa, thank you for having me.
How are you?
Doing good, yeah, really good. It's been a busy start to the year, but doing really good.
Absolutely, life as an author. So just before I get to the questions, just to let you all know that Jaspreet's actually one of our Rising Star winners. Many years ago, I met her, so I know all about Jaspreet and where she's come from and the incredible, amazing things she's done. But just so that the audience can understand a little bit more, tell us a little bit about the start of your journey. Where did it all begin?
Where did it all begin? Yep. So I'm a poet, writer, and teacher. So it's worth kind of describing how that journey happened. And I started writing poetry when I was a teenager, around the age of about 13, 14 was when I first started writing. But I only started sharing it with the world about 5, 6 years ago. And that's when I first started the performance poetry, the spoken word poetry, and then sharing bits of my writing with the world was only about 5, 6 years ago. And alongside that journey, I've got an academic background in history and gender studies. I wanted to go into teaching. That's something I knew for quite some time, that I love working with young people, and definitely felt that education could be a space for me to help young people and to help educate and a form of kind of positive social change. So I went into teaching. So I was teaching in secondary schools in London for about 5, 6 years. And I was kind of balancing both careers alongside each other, kind of pursuing this career as a writer and as a poet, and then also pursuing this journey as a teacher. But in the background, I'd been working on this book, on Brown Girl Like Me, for the last 7 years. I've been penning ideas for this book for Asian women. And in 2020, I took the plunge and decided to take a break from teaching for a little bit to really pursue this journey as a writer. And that's what's brought me to where I am now.
Fantastic. So, and if any of you have ever heard Jaspreet and her spoken word, we've had the benefit of listening at a number of our award ceremonies. Absolutely blows you away, the eloquency, the power of her words. So go and find that on YouTube and have a look yourself, and again, prepare to be moved. So in terms of the actual book, so you've just started writing it, you've been penning it over 7 years. Now it's here, it's actually in our hands. Tell me a little bit about the book. What's inside?
So this book, we're calling it a lot of things. We're calling it a manifesto, we're calling it a call to arms, we're calling it a toolkit, a guidebook for Asian women. And it's honestly the book I wish I had growing up, as a young brown girl growing up in London, feeling like I never saw myself anywhere. I never saw brown women in the mainstream, on TV screens, in books, in history books, in places of power, in places of privilege. You just never saw Asian women. But when I did see them, and when we would have a few bits of representation here and there, brown women were always being shown in the same kind of tired narrative, that we're submissive and that we're quiet and that we're weak and we're docile, and really kind of showing brown women in this one way, in this one lens. And I was just really tired of that, tired of this feeling of feeling ignored, tired of kind of this lack of representation. And then over the years, as I got older, kind of navigating through the education system, then going on to university, also feeling like brown girls were being put in a box in educational institutions as well. And there's a few stories in the book of where I've mentioned how in educational settings, brown girls are just not being focused on enough. Our aspirations aren't raised, because there's, again, these narratives that Asian women are just going to go get married and have kids. So what's the point of raising their aspirations? Even though we academically are the second smartest in the country, academically we'd follow closely behind Chinese boys and girls. So academically we're very smart. So why is that just not being reflected anywhere? And then as well as all those things, then going into the workplace and then also managing what it's like as an Asian woman in the home, all the cultural pressures we have to face. So there's all these different variables of what makes an Asian woman, but there was just no guidance on how to navigate all of this, all this intersectional parts of our identity. So I got to the point of enough complaining, enough being frustrated, and I started interviewing other Asian women. So that's what I was doing for the last 3-4 years, interviewing Asian women from across the country, from every Asian demographic, Pakistani women, Indian women, Bangladeshi women, Sri Lankan women, and also kind of Asian women who have settled in different parts of the diaspora here in the Western world, and started collating all our stories and listening to women about their perspective and hearing it from their voice. And we've got girls as young as the age of kind of 15 in the book, all the way up to women in their 80s and 90s. So this is really the book of saying, we are Asian women, this is who we are, it's coming from our voice, and hopefully guiding people on all the things that we have to navigate. So the book looks at mental health, it looks at education, it looks at microaggressions, body image, it looks at love and relationships, and also kind of brings it into the present day and looking at parenthood and raising the next generation, as well as kind of looking at the digital age and how stuff like social media has really helped brown women navigate their identity and kind of form this sense of sisterhood with other Asian women. So it was about time that a book like this existed. And when I was doing the research and looking for other books like this, the last one that was written like this, a non-fiction book about South Asian women in the UK, was written in 1978. So about 40 years ago. And I was like, how has it been 4 decades since somebody's done this and had the opportunity to do this? And here we are, and it's ready to go out to the world now.
And it's an incredible book. And I find that even the cover of the book is such a powerful image, because I think you are portraying that traditionalism, but also the breaking of the stereotype.
Absolutely.
That you've kind of alluded to. So how did you find it writing a book? Was it, I mean, obviously it's taken you quite a long time. Did you find it quite cathartic? I mean, I know when I wrote my book, there were moments where I cried, I could kick myself for being so silly. I was frustrated at the world. How did you find that experience?
That roller coaster of, one day you're feeling like, yes, I'm getting somewhere, this is great. The next day you're like, what the hell did I just write? That was a load of rubbish. Yeah, it's such a roller coaster writing a book. And I guess it was a really healing experience writing this book, because I was kind of unlayering a lot of things that I'd kind of bottled up for a long time, or memories I kind of pushed to the back of my head, and experiences that I kind of ignored. And it was a really kind of cathartic, healing experience to kind of let that all out, as well as speaking to other women that were going through similar things. So it definitely was really healing. And like I mentioned, I've kind of been penning this book for about 6-7 years, but I took the plunge to actually sit down, write it at the start of 2020. And then, of course, in March 2020, the whole world turned upside down. So I did not expect to write this book during a worldwide pandemic. So obviously that had its own complications, because I was hoping to interview all the women face to face, because I definitely love kind of that energy of being in the same room with somebody and actually being face to face. So a lot of the interviews had to move to digital formats. I had just started a research fellowship with Birkbeck University, which is basically a fancy position where I get to do research with the university. I would have had my own office, access to all the resources, and I was just about to move into my office and the pandemic started. So I was in my bedroom, had to set up a desk, like many other people during the pandemic, had to set up a desk at home. So that wasn't quite how I imagined I'd be writing my first book. But in a way, I think I'm a big believer that everything happens for a reason. So maybe I was meant to be at home when I was writing this book, because the home is one of the most complex spaces that brown women have to navigate. It's a place of healing and solace, and there's a lot of beautiful things about the home, but there's a lot of complex things that we have to to deal with in the home space. So I feel like maybe this is where I had to write it. I had to be at home in my bedroom with grandma cooking downstairs, hubby fighting for Wi-Fi connection. I had to go through all of that. And ultimately it was really healing, and it was a really beautiful process. Don't get me wrong, lots of stresses and tears and all of that too. But yeah, I definitely loved it, and can't wait to do more.
It's so funny when you say that, because you look at the book and you see it as a book and it's an author that's written it, but to know the story that's gone behind it. And I've interviewed lots of authors that have written their books during the pandemic, and they've all said the same thing. Maybe it's supposed to happen for a reason. Maybe we should have been at home. Maybe the timing was right. So, you know, for that, it's, as I say, it must taste sweeter to know that you've done it under such adverse circumstances. So you talk about the women that you've interviewed in the book. Is there one particular story you'd like to quickly share about one of the women? Perhaps a story that moved you, or a story that you personally related to, and that you could share as part of this interview?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I got to meet so many incredible Asian women that were CEOs of companies, women that were filmmakers, Olympic athletes, so many incredible different Asian women at different demographics. But I guess one of the ones that definitely jumps out to me, and one for me personally that's always going to have a place in my heart, is actually the stories of Biji, of my husband's grandma, who we both care for. She's his maternal grandma. And it's got little nuggets of her stories throughout this book, because that's definitely a demographic of Asian women that have been neglected and we don't hear much from. And she's an incredible woman. She's now in her late 80s, and she's had a really difficult life as an Asian woman. She was widowed at quite a young age. About 30 years ago, she lost my husband's granddad. She also had 2 daughters. She didn't have any sons, which had its own complications because of this kind of ongoing son preference in South Asian communities, that she never bared a son. So she'd been through a lot throughout her life, a lot of struggles, as well as migrating from India, from Punjab to the UK, not knowing a word of English, like many other migrants that have come from different countries, that kind of difficulty of trying to assimilate and settle into a new country. So she's been through a lot. But despite all of that, she's just such a loving, kind, beautiful soul. And in the Sikh faith, we've got this principle called Jagdi Kala, which means living with eternal optimism. So no matter what you go through, the ups and downs, to live with this sense of kind of hope and optimism for good, and coming from a place of love. And I think kind of hearing her stories taught me a lot, that no matter what we're going through as Asian women, as brown women, the ups and downs, the struggles, the hardship, and all the things that we might have to fight, coming from a place of love is what's going to help us, not necessarily coming from a place of anger all the time. I think the anger, it makes us strong, but it's the love that's going to make us powerful. And I think that's something that she's definitely taught me. So her stories, specifically in the chapter on love, is really beautiful. And I think that kind of holds a really special place for me.
And that's lovely, because you've created a legacy there of her words and her story, kind of, you know, within the book. Is she super proud of you? I bet she is.
She is, even though it's written in English, so hopefully maybe one day it'll get translated to Hindi or Punjabi so she can read it. But I have read bits to her, and I've showed her where her name is and where it comes up in the book, so she's really proud. And the whole family really is. It has been a journey for my family as well, my mum and dad and everyone else, that this is a really proud moment for all of us. And
I think anyone who knows you, Jaspreet, is so proud, because you've got such a beautiful view on life, and there's so much knowledge and wisdom there. So to put that into a book, and the very essence of you is to help other women navigate this space. So yeah, hats off to you. So if you had to choose your favorite chapter of the book, so you've talked about the love chapter, which obviously has your husband's grandmother in it. What was your favorite chapter, or what is your favorite chapter?
Oh, it's so hard. It's like choosing your baby, isn't it?
I know.
So yeah, the love chapter definitely has a special place in my heart. And the love chapter is looking at love, dating, and relationships, because brown girls aren't meant to date. And throughout our lives, we're having to navigate, stay away from boys, don't talk to boys, don't go near boys. And then as soon as perhaps we've gone to uni, started work, and we're in our mid-20s, every auntie around us wants to know, when are we getting married? Have you met a boy? So it's a really complex love journey for brown women. So that chapter I definitely have a special place for. But I think the last chapter, it's looking at kind of sisterhood and solidarity. It's looking at kind of this new decade of how Asian women have used the digital age to navigate their identity. And I've got kind of a love-hate relationship with social media. It's been an incredible place for me to obviously share my work over the years. Obviously, kind of coming from a working class background, ethnic minority background, I didn't necessarily have all the networks and connections growing up. So social media was kind of my place to build a lot of those networks. And if anything, it was kind of like a portfolio of all the work that I've been doing over the years. So it's been incredible for that, and all the amazing women that I've met through the digital space. But then there is the negative side of it, of how it impacts our well-being, and the troll attacks, the death threats, the rape threats, the horrible things I've also seen in the digital world. So that last chapter, I think, is really important now, kind of going forward for Asian women, what we need to do next, and kind of holding space for that sense of sisterhood and solidarity that we found. But how do we now move that into the physical space as well? So it's not just happening digitally, that this is happening in the real world as well. So yeah, I think that chapter is really important, because it's kind of showing where we've been, and it's showing kind of the last 30 decades, 40 decades of 30, 40 years of what it's been like for Asian women in this country, women like my mum, my grandma, but women like us, millennial women, and now this kind of Gen Z generation, what it's like. And now it's kind of, okay, what's the next chapter? What's the next step for us? So yeah, that last chapter is really important.
So also, every book, obviously, in my mind's eye, leaves that legacy, has an impact somewhere. So if we was to roll forward 4 or 5 years, and a young brown girl came to you and talked about your book, what would you like her to say? What impact has this book had on her life?
Oh, that's a really lovely question. I guess I hope they say it's helped them heal. And that's definitely kind of the nucleus of this book, was really to find a sense of healing and for education. It's kind of those two things hand in hand, healing and education. So I really do hope in a couple of years' time, young girls that have read it feel like they've healed from maybe a lot of the things they've been suffering from, and often suffering from in silence. But they've now got the tools on how to navigate this journey going forward, and they feel like they're prepared to handle anything that comes their way, because they feel more secure in who they are. Because this book is really showing brown girls and brown women that for us to feel empowered and feel inspired and to know how to navigate our lives going forward, we need to be proud of who we are, and we need to own our identity. We need to own the fact that we are brown women balancing all these things, our Eastern culture, this Western culture. And like you said, I think the image of this cover, which was taken on my wedding day, by the way, which was, who knew this picture was going to end up being on a book cover? But I think that really kind of personifies how I want brown women to feel like they can uphold their identity, who they are, their Asian culture, but they feel strong and they feel empowered in that too. So hopefully that's how girls feel a couple of years down the line. They've read this book and they feel strong and empowered in who they are.
And I think that's wonderful, because that's exactly what we want. And one of the things I would say, even from my perspective, I found this so insightful in terms of gaps in my knowledge around your culture and things like that. So I think the book is for everyone, because I think there's a big element of allyship as well, that, that I even found reading it and again doing that work myself to educate myself on what that looks like for brown women. So I think the book's for everyone, but obviously I just want it to have that impact. I just can imagine a young girl getting this and just being, oh my God, this is amazing. And all the role models, including yourself, that are, you know, that are in the book, that have shared their stories. So what's next for Jaspreet? So we've done the book. World domination, I think.
World domination.
What's next?
So yeah, what's next? I guess over the last couple of years, I've really been trying to figure out, where is this journey taking me? And I used to think that I can only be a spoken word poet, or I can only be a teacher, or I can only be a writer and an author, and I'm going to have to fit myself into that one box. But I think I've now started to realize that I'm out here to educate, and that doesn't necessarily just have to be in the classroom. That can be through books, that can be through poetry, and it can be through all these different mediums. So I guess what's happening next is now seeing what different mediums I can use to educate in the best possible way. More writing, more teaching, more poetry. So that's where I'm going next, of now really pushing forward and on how I can really educate in the best way possible, reaching as many people as possible. And I'm glad I've figured out what those core values are, that I'm here to help people, I'm here to educate, I'm here to inspire. So the more that I can do that, to me, that's a blessed and happy life.
Absolutely, and you certainly do inspire. And I think that's kind of I think we're all coming to that realization that we don't have to be boxed anymore. You know, there's so much value that you can add by having that kind of portfolio of activities and saying yes to opportunities that you might not necessarily have said yes to before. So where can people find you? And before they go there, obviously I know you obviously on social as Behind the Netra, you know, which, do you just want to tell the audience, what does the Netra mean? Because it's actually got beautiful meaning, hasn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely. So Behind the Netra is where everyone can find me online, on Instagram, Twitter, all those good places. But Behind the Netra, it came about when I started the spoken word poetry, and I was deciding on kind of a stage name, my poetry name. And at the time I was studying a bit of Sanskrit. So I'm a big lover of linguistics and learning about languages, learning about the origins of words and the etymology of words. So a lot of South Asian languages have derived from Sanskrit, but it's similar to Latin. It's no longer a spoken language anymore. But when I was looking at kind of the Sanskrit language, I came across this word netra, and it had thousands of different interpretations of what this one word could mean. But it basically meant kind of our eyes are the window to our soul, which is a saying lots of people might have heard of. And people might have heard of kind of the third eye, but it's really looking behind our physical presence. So looking behind what we see as a person, who are we on a deeper level? And I really love that idea of looking behind the netra. Who are we as people? Who are we as humans? And I think my poetry, my writing, everything that I do really kind of looks into, okay, what is behind the netra? So yeah, that's how that word came about.
Beautiful. And again, I love the meaning as well. So obviously, thank you so much for joining me today. I'd encourage everyone to go and buy this book. It's available now, Jaspreet, is that right?
It's available to pre-order, yeah, and it's coming out on the 17th of February. It's available at all good bookshops and online. And you can also find all the links at www.browngirllikeme.com.
Fantastic. So pre-orders really matter to authors. So please, if you're watching this now, pop onto Amazon or wherever you buy your books and place that order now. But Jaspreet, I wish you every single success. I know you're part of our wider family and we will never lose touch. But again, I would encourage everyone to go and give Jaspreet a follow her work. She's definitely going to do some magical things in the world. Thank you so much for joining me.